Black CEO. Insulted by white Heiress over cake minutes later. $1.05. B. Dynasty collapses. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Look at her covered in cake, acting like she belongs. The cruelty landed first. Then the laughter followed, sharp, glittering, synchronized like champagne glasses clinking together after a toast. The black woman stood in the center of the ballroom, motionless, her elegant black dress now streaked with white frosting and crumbled layers of cake sliding down her shoulder. Cream clung to her lashes. A smear cut across her cheekbone like a wound. Her breathing stayed steady, but her fingers trembled ever so slightly around the phone she clutched in her right hand. Across from her, the white heiress' golden hair curled perfectly. Satin blush dress hugging her privileged frame laughed loudest. Her friends flanked her. 2 tuxedo-clad men and another gleaming bridesmaid, all grinning with the bright, effortless arrogance of people who had never been told no, never been humbled, never been forced to understand the weight of their own actions. One of them pointed at the black woman and wheezed. She actually thought she could stand here with us? At this event? Another tilted his phone, recording her like she was a spectacle for his followers. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The heiress stepped closer, amusement curling her lip. Her voice dropped to a venom-laced whisper meant to sting more than the cake ever could. Women like you don't get to stand at the center of a ballroom. You're supposed to serve at the edges. The laughter behind her swelled again, bright and merciless. The black woman didn't respond. Not verbally. She blinked slowly, frosting slipping from her lashes. Her face remained still, shock frozen beneath composure, but her posture said something else entirely. It said, "You just made a mistake," but no one in the room saw it. Not yet. The heiress flicked a piece of frosting off the black woman's shoulder like brushing lint from a coat. "There," she said, smiling cruelly. "Now you look like what you are." Someone behind her gasped in delighted horror. Someone else recorded closer. The ballroom lights, soft and glowing, caught the humiliated woman's silhouette, turning the scene into a cruel portrait of class, color, and unchecked entitlement. The cake sat ruined on the table beside them, a once perfect white confection now missing a handful from its top, what the heiress had grabbed moments earlier before shoving it into the black woman's face. While the cameras were rolling, the black woman lifted the phone to her ear again, frosting smeared across the glass screen. Her voice was low, almost fragile, but steady enough to ripple the air. "Are you still there?" A calm voice answered on the other end. "Yes, ma'am. Standing by." She didn't say anything else. Not yet. But the tiny nod she gave was a movement no one in the room recognized, except her assistant, standing quietly near the wall, fingers already brushing the discreet earpiece in anticipation. Across the ballroom, a woman murmured to her partner, "Should we tell security to remove her?" Her partner shrugged. "Why bother? She's already embarrassed herself." The heiress folded her arms, satisfied with the damage shed inflicted. "You should go clean yourself up," she said brightly. "This is an exclusive gathering. Not everyone gets to look ridiculous on the dance floor." Cake dripped from the black woman's collarbone. Her dress clung to her shoulders, heavy with sweet ruin. But her eyes were no longer hurt. They were quiet, focused. Dangerous in a way the heiress was too naive to understand. "Seriously," one of the rich boys added, still laughing. "She looks pathetic." But the black woman wasn't thinking about humiliation anymore. She was thinking about numbers, about signatures, about assets, about the $5 billion corporation that lived or died on her word. The heiress, oblivious, flicked her hair and smiled like she had won something. She hadn't, because only one person in this ballroom held real power, and it wasn't the girl laughing. The black woman wiped a streak of cake from her jawline with the back of her hand. She raised the phone once more, voice sinking into a soft, decisive whisper. Stay ready. The room didn't understand what those two words meant. But they would, because this wasn't the moment she broke. This was the moment she chose. And by the end of the night, the people laughing in this ballroom would learn something they had never been taught. Power doesn't need to be clean to be real. Even covered in cake, it can still destroy an empire. For a moment, the ballroom didn't breathe. The laughter still echoed faintly thin, lingering, almost embarrassed by its own existence now that silence had taken over. 100 chandeliers glowed overhead, warm and golden, yet somehow the air felt colder. As if the temperature had dropped a few degrees the instant the black woman lifted her head and really looked at the heiress who had humiliated her. Cake dripped from her temple to her collarbone, slow and heavy. It hit the floor with a soft thud no one dared acknowledge. The heiress blinked, her smirk wavering for the first time, but only briefly. Entitlement rearranged itself across her features like muscle memory. "Oh, don't give me that look," she said, scoffing lightly. "You're the one who walked into the photo line. Honestly, what did you think was going to happen?" Her friends laughed again, but quieter now, hesitant. A few exchanged glances, suddenly unsure. Something was wrong, not with her, with the room. The black woman didn't flinch. Frosting clung to her jaw like war paint, yet she stood with more dignity than anyone else in the ballroom. Her phone remained in her hand, dimmed now, but still connected, still alive. "Is she crying?" One of the bridesmaids whispered, leaning forward to stare. "Good," another boy muttered. Maybe she'll finally understand her place. Yet the black woman's eyes weren't wet. What shimmered there wasn't sorrow. It was calculation. Her assistant saw at first the shift, the invisible line the CEO crossed internally, the one few ever returned from. Standing at the far left of the ballroom, half hidden behind a pillar, she touched her earpiece and straightened subtly, the way a soldier shifts when the commander draws breath. The heiress noticed none of this. She was too busy reveling. "You should have seen your face when the cake hit you," she said, giggling. "Priceless. I mean, did no one ever teach you how to carry yourself around people like us?" The black woman's posture didn't move, but the atmosphere did. Guests who had been cheerfully recording now began lowering their phones slowly, cautiously. A man in a tux swallowed, sensing an unfamiliar tension creeping along the edges of the room. A woman near the cake table whispered, This is different. Something's off." But the heiress pressed on, emboldened by the echo chamber of her own arrogance. "You know what's funny?" she said, tilting her head. "For a second when you walked in, I actually thought you were part of the staff. That dress looks like—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The implication hovered, acidic and unmistakable. The black woman finally moved. Only her hand lifting slowly to wipe a streak of frosting from her forehead. She lowered that same hand to her side, letting the ruined cream drip onto the marble floor. The tiny splatters were louder than the laughter had been. Across the room, someone whispered, "Shay's not embarrassed." "That's strange," another voice answered. "No, Shay's thinking." The heiress stepped closer, emboldened again by ignorance. "You should thank me," she said sweetly. "I just made sure nobody mistakes you for one of us ever again." Her friends stifled more laughter behind manicured hands. The black woman turned her head just slightly to look at them. Not long enough to be hostile. Long enough to be understood. The room tightened. Something invisible coiled beneath the chandeliers, pulling every breath into one held note. The assistant's voice murmured through the earpiece again, almost a whisper. "Mom, the boardrooms across all divisions are still online. They're waiting. Whatever you decide, they'll execute." The black woman didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke for her. The heiress, frustrated that her fun was dying, flicked her fingers dismissively. "Oh, relax. You can go clean yourself up now. We're trying to take photos and you're ruining the mood." The black woman lowered her eyes, not in submission but in assessment. A slow breath filled her lungs. The heiress misread it instantly. "Look at that," she said, smirking. "I bet she's trying not to cry again." Someone behind her chuckled. But the man in the gray tux 2 steps away didn't laugh. His brow furrowed, his stance stiffened. He had attended enough investor galas to recognize the strange electricity he was feeling now. "This isn't normal," he muttered. The heiress whipped her head around. "What isn't?" He nodded toward the black woman. "Her. She's too composed. People don't look like that when they're helpless." The heiress rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. She's nobody." The black woman lifted her head at that. It was small, barely a movement, but it was seismic. The shift rippled outward, silent but devastating, pushing through every bystander's chest like a quiet realization. The wrong woman had been humiliated. The heiress laughed again, oblivious to her own downfall. "Come on," she said to her friends. "Let's get more cake. This party needs something fun." She reached toward the table, but this time no one followed her, because the room wasn't on her side anymore. It was watching the other woman, waiting. A presence had awakened in the center of the ballroom, frosting covered but unmoved, different, sharper, heavier. The kind of presence that suggested the night had just changed direction. The kind of presence that foretold collapse. And for the first time since the cake hit her face, the black woman smiled. Barely. Softly. Dangerously. She whispered one sentence so quiet only the assistant heard it. "Begin monitoring their assets." The air dropped another degree, and the heiress, still laughing, had no idea that the woman she covered in cake had just placed her empire on a silent countdown. The ballroom didn't realize it was holding its breath not until the black woman lowered her phone slightly and the entire room seemed to tilt with the movement. The frosting on her cheek had begun to dry, forming pale cracks against her skin like battle markings. Her dress, once smooth and immaculate, now clung in damp patches from the cake, yet somehow she looked more composed than anyone else in the hall. Not polished, not perfect, but unshakable. Across the room, her assistant, the woman in the charcoal dress, straightened her posture. The tiny in-ear device hidden beneath her hair glinted under chandelier light. She pressed one nail to it softly. "Mom," she murmured, her voice steady. "We're tracking everything. Their inflows, their pending transactions, their emergency credit lines. All monitored. Say when." The black woman didn't respond. Not with words. Instead, her eyes scanned the ballroom, slow, deliberate, assessing. She saw the heiress still laughing with her friends, oblivious. She saw guests who were too frightened to pick a side. She saw the ones who had smirked earlier now biting their lips, suddenly unsure of their place. She saw the ones who had filmed her ruin, yet now hid their phones behind their backs, pretending innocence. And at the far end of the room, she saw the only person who mattered, the heiress mother, a woman with diamond earrings, sharp as daggers, and a lineage built on old money. The matriarch stood in rigid posture, watching with a calculating gaze. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't smiling. Her daughter's cruelty was normal. Outcomes like tonight's were not. Her eyes narrowed, studying the black CEO the way generals study an enemy line before battle. The CEO noticed, for one quiet moment, two powerful women locked eyes across a sea of marble and light, one born into legacy, one forged in fire. And only one recognized the other as a threat. The black woman inhaled once, clean and steady. The heiress, still not understanding the silence, waved her off with a bored flick of her wrist. "Ugh, can someone just get her out of my frame? I swear this whole thing is going to ruin my pictures." Her friends laughed again, but softer. A young man in a navy tux hesitated before lifting his phone. Something about the black woman's expression made him lower it halfway. "She's not reacting how I expected," he murmured. "Because she's embarrassed," the heiress snapped. But she wasn't. She was calculating the precise moment to end a dynasty. A soft vibration hummed in the black woman's palm. Her phone screen lit up with a discreet notification from her assistance team. Asset watch active. Pending merger. Locked. Key signatories online. Chest rising gently, she whispered. Good. Only her assistant heard it. Only her assistant smiled. The heiress' laughter died suddenly when she finally noticed the room, not how they looked at the black woman, but how they no longer looked at her. It unsettled her. Why is everyone staring? She snapped at the nearest guest. The guest didn't answer. They simply stepped back, distancing themselves. The heiress scoffed, flustered. Oh, please, don't be dramatic. She's nobody. The black woman finally lifted her head at that. Not aggressively, not defensively, just slowly with the calm, lethal certainty of someone who had outgrown being underestimated. She took a single step forward. The room tightened instantly. Even the music softened, as if the instruments themselves sensed the shift in pressure. The assistant's voice whispered, "Mom, the merger contract is still in pre-execution status. One word from you, and I know," the black woman said, voice low. The heiress rolled her eyes. Oh my God, is she seriously trying to act intimidating? "Sweetheart, you have frosting in your eyebrows," her friends giggled. But in the crowd, a man in a gray tux spoke up, voice low but firm. "Stop!" The heiress turned sharply. "What did you say?" "I said stop," he repeated. "You don't understand who you're talking to." A chill swept through the brideside table. The heiress scoffed incredulously. "You're defending her?" He swallowed, glancing at the black woman with a wary respect. "I'm protecting you." For the first time, genuine confusion cracked through her arrogance. What is that supposed to mean? But the black woman didn't give her time to process. She raised the phone again, not to record, not to call security, not to capture evidence, to issue the quietest, most expensive command the room had ever heard. She whispered into the mic, "Prepare the freeze." Her assistant nodded once, mechanical and sharp. In the corner of the ballroom, several phones buzzed at the same time. Advisors, board members, bankers, the Lockridge partners. Across the room, the heiress mother's eyes widened, finally understanding the gravity of what her daughter had done. The black woman lowered her phone. The frosting on her dress no longer looked like humiliation. It looked like the last mistake the heiress family would ever make. The seed had been planted, and the room understood too late that the woman they mocked with cake had just placed $5 billion on a silent countdown. The ballroom's golden light trembled just slightly, as if the chandeliers sensed the shift before the humans did. The black woman stood still, cake crusted along her jawline, her dress stained with sugar and humiliation. But her eyes told another story, one no one in that room knew, one none of them were prepared for. Because tonight wasn't the first time she had been laughed at, and it wouldn't be the last time someone regretted it. She had learned young that power often hides in silence, that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest, that the ones who mock the hardest often stand on the weakest ground. Her mind flicked back brief, precise flashes like lightning across a summer sky. 17 years old, standing outside a scholarship interview room, a receptionist looking her up and down before saying, "There's no cleaning shift today, sweetheart." Staff enters from the back, 21, pitching her first app prototype at a tech event. Investors nodding politely, then telling a colleague later, "Brilliant idea, wrong face." 25, walking into her first acquisition meeting. Security stopping her at the elevator with a cold. Deliveries use the basement. Even at 30, after buying her third company, board members still introduced her as the consultant, never imagining she could be the owner. Each slight carved her sharper. Each insult forged her colder. Each humiliation refined her into someone who didn't raise her voice, but raised empires. And in that same span of years, the heiress she faced now had likely never heard a single no, never worked for a paycheck, never feared eviction, never had the world judge her by her skin before it even heard her speak. The contrast was almost poetic. Behind the black woman, her assistant murmured updates through the earpiece. "Mom, background scan complete. Confirmation. The Lockridge Whitfield Group controls 14 subsidiaries. 7 show debt exposure. 4 are over-leveraged. The $5B merger is the only stabilizing factor." The black woman absorbed it silently. She always knew the heiress's family floated on borrowed prestige, but hearing the numbers, hearing the rot beneath the gold, made everything clearer. The heiress's cruelty wasn't just habit. It was entitlement stacked on a collapsing foundation. One shove and the entire dynasty would crumble. Across the ballroom, the matriarch of that dynasty realized it at the same moment. Her eyes widened a fraction, her spine stiffened. She knew what was coming. Mothers born in wealth often recognize danger before their children do, but she was too late. Because humiliation didn't break the black woman. Humiliation reminded her of every locked door she smashed through, every seat she took, despite whispers, every company she bought from the same men who once dismissed her, every boardroom she dominated after being told she wasn't a cultural fit. Her rise wasn't an accident, it was an answer. And tonight, covered in cake, surrounded by laughter, she remembered exactly why she built her empire in silence. Heavy footsteps approached. It was the heiress' father, tall, silver-haired, wrapped in old money confidence. He looked at the black woman with polite confusion, then turned to his daughter. "What is going on here?" The heiress just laughed. "Oh my God, Dad, relax. It's just a joke." But her father's gaze snapped back to the black woman, noticing the calm, the presence, the way the room seemed to orbit her now. He recognized power. Men like him always did. And deep in his chest, an instinct whispered, "We're in trouble." Before he could speak again, the black woman lifted her phone. One small motion, barely noticeable, but enough to drain the last color from the matriarch's face. The heiress rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. What's she gonna do? Call security?" No, she wasn't calling security. She was calling consequences. The kind measured in billions. The kind families like theirs weren't built to survive. And for the first time since the cake hit her face, the black woman felt something warm bloom beneath her ribs. Not anger, clarity. Tonight wasn't about humiliation. It was about memory and repayment, and the repayment was coming. The heiress' laughter finally began to dim, not because she understood the situation, but because the people around her stopped laughing with her. Privilege, for the first time, didn't echo. The matriarch stepped closer, diamonds catching the chandelier glow. Her expression was tight, nostrils pinched, shoulders stiff with a tension money usually solved. "What did you do?" she demanded softly, not to her daughter but to the room itself, as if it might answer. But the room had already chosen its silence. The CEO watched her carefully. Cake still clung to her skin, dried in thin, cracked streaks. Her dress remained stained and heavy, but none of it mattered. The humiliation had evaporated. What remained was intent. Her assistant's voice slipped into her ear again, steady and controlled. "Mom!" Confirmation. "The Whitfield-Lockridge merger papers are in final holding. 2 signatures pending her father's and yours. Without your authorization, the entire $5B valuation collapses." The CEO's eyes flicked briefly to the heiress's father. He stood rigid, the weight of a billion-dollar future settling across his shoulders like a lead coat. Only minutes ago, he was smiling, shaking hands, posing for photographs. Now his jaw twitched with the tight, forced restraint of a man trying desperately not to show he was cornered. He cleared his throat, voice low and diplomatic. "Let's not escalate a misunderstanding," the heiress scoffed. "Dad, please. It was a joke. She's blowing it out of—" "Enough," he snapped, the first crack in his polished veneer. The matriarch turned to him sharply. A silent argument sparked between them, wide eyes, shallow breaths, an entire marital dialogue compressed into seconds. They knew. They knew exactly how fragile their empire was. The glitter, the ballroom, the prestige, all of it hung from a single thread: the merger. Without it, debts would surface, creditors would call, board members would revolt, subsidiaries would fold like cards in a weak hand. All because of their daughter's cruelty. The CEO didn't move, didn't speak. She simply let them calculate the damage. The heiress father approached her cautiously, holding up both hands in a gesture meant to diffuse tension, though fear trembled faintly in the edges of his smile. "There's no need to react rashly," he said. "Tonight is stressful. Emotions run high. We can resolve this with a conversation. Privately." The CEO's gaze was calm, steady, unreadable. He swallowed. "My family has worked very hard on this merger. A disruption would be unfortunate for both sides." Across the room, her assistant murmured, "Correction, ma'am. It would not harm us at all. Their group is the sole beneficiary. You hold all leverage." The heiress heard that, and for the first time her smile faltered. "Wait," she said, stepping forward. "What does she mean by that? Dad, what is she talking about?" Her father didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was written plainly across his face, etched deeper with every second he looked at the woman his daughter had humiliated. The matriarch turned sharply to her husband. "You said their investor needed us." His silence was her answer. And the CEO watched it all collapse, the dawning horror, the unraveling lies, the terrified calculus of people who realized the power they mocked belonged entirely to the one they covered in cake. The heiress' voice rose in panic. "Dad? MOM? Why aren't you saying anything?" The matriarch finally spoke, her voice tight, controlled, trembling with suppressed rage. "Because that woman holds the pen that decides whether we survive the quarter." All eyes turned to the CEO. In her hand, the phone buzzed softly again. Her assistant's voice whispered, "Legal team awaits your directive. One word, and the merger is dead." The CEO lifted her gaze to the heiress, the girl who had thrown cake at her, who had laughed in her face, who had told her she didn't belong. For the first time all night, the heiress stepped back. Fear, not frosting, colored the air now. Because she finally understood this wasn't a woman she embarrassed. This was a woman she needed, and she had chosen humiliation over caution. The CEO breathed in slowly, the frosting tightening on her skin as it dried. Everything was aligned. Everything was ready. Everything was one command away. One word, and a $5 billion dynasty would fall. The air in the ballroom thickened, heavy, metallic, almost electric. 100 whispered calculations seemed to swirl at once. Yet the black woman at the center of it all stood perfectly still, cake dried in sharp ridges across her cheekbone, forming pale, jagged lines like battlefield scars. Her dress clung to her body, ruined by sugar and humiliation, but her posture was a weapon. The heiress stepped backward again, the first real fear cracking through her practiced vanity. "Dad," she whispered, "tell her she can't do anything." "Tell her she can," her father cut in sharply. "And she will." The room fell silent. The matriarch's diamonds sparkled with every shallow breath she took. She finally faced the black woman head-on, voice low, trembling, measured. "Please, whatever your response is, let's discuss it. This doesn't have to escalate." But it already had. The CEO's assistant touched her earpiece. "Mom," she whispered, "all divisions are standing by. Legal, treasury, compliance. The freeze order is preloaded. Awaiting verbal confirmation." The heiress snapped her gaze toward her parents. "Freeze order? What are they talking about? Dad, why didn't you tell me she had this kind of power?" Her mother's jaw clenched. "Because you would have mocked her anyway." A soft, rapid buzz vibrated in the CEO's palm. Another update. Liquidity models ready. Merger authorization 1/2 pending. All systems 1 word from execution. She didn't even blink. Around her, the crowd shifted uneasily. Phones lowered, shoulders tightened. The earlier delight, the smug laughter, the entitled amusement evaporated, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that the woman covered in frosting wasn't the punchline. She was the consequence. The heiress, voice cracking, tried again. "Look, I didn't mean it like that. It was just cake. It was just—" "It was humiliation," her mother snapped, voice slicing through the air. "And humiliation never just stays humiliation when the other person holds more power than you." The heiress swallowed hard, but the black woman still hadn't moved. She simply breathed slow, steady, controlled. Her assistant whispered again, "Mom, whenever you're ready." The CEO finally lifted her chin, a tiny motion that felt seismic. Her eyes locked onto the heiress, not hateful, not vengeful, just resolute. The heiress felt something in her chest collapse. "Wait, please. Don't." The black woman raised her phone. All eyes widened. The room leaned in. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their light. Her voice came out soft, so soft it barely stirred the air, but heavy enough to tilt the entire night on its axis. "Execute the freeze." The assistant didn't hesitate. Confirmed. The ballroom's silence cracked open. Across the hall, a dozen phones vibrated at once. Financial advisors, legal directors, board members. Their expressions shifted in horrifying synchrony. Confusion, shock, recognition, panic. One advisor stumbled toward the heiress' parents. "Sir, ma'am, your liquidity lines just vanished, all of them. I don't know how." Another notification exploded across screens. Merger authorization suspended. The heiress' father paled. Her mother grabbed his arm, nails digging deep. The heiress herself looked like the ground beneath her had disappeared. This isn't happening, she whispered. But it was. And the black woman finally turned away, not in anger, not in triumph, but with the cool detachment of someone who had already made her decision long before the cake was thrown. The assistant stepped beside her, tablet glowing with cascading financial data. "It's done," she said. "The countdown has started." The CEO nodded once small, quiet, final. Behind her, the heiress whispered a shaky, desperate apology lost beneath the rising storm of panic from her family. Because the freeze wasn't just a command, it was the fault line, and the empire built on arrogance had just been split open. Panic doesn't scream at first. It tightens, it coils. It crawls up the spine like a cold hand, grasping vertebra by vertebra. That was the feeling spreading through the Whitfield Lockridge ballroom now. The freeze order had detonated silently, no alarms, no flashing lights, just a series of vibrating phones and paling faces. The heiress stood motionless, as though the world had suddenly tilted and left her teetering on its edge. Her glittering dress still shimmered, but she didn't. The gleam in her eyes had shattered into something raw and bewildered. Her father's phone buzzed violently. He snatched it open, his face drained, then another buzz, and another. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Account, access revoked. Credit lines suspended, merger pipeline. Dismantled asset review. Immediate. He stared at the screen as if it were cracking beneath his thumbs. This can't be right. This is everything. This is the entire structure. The matriarch leaned over his shoulder. As she read, color drained from her lips. Behind them, the board advisors swarmed, their expressions sharp with terror. One whispered, "She just took us off life support." Another added, "This was our last stabilizer. Without the merger, our lenders will." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The heiress stumbled backward, her heels scraping against marble. No. This is insane. It was a joke. It was just cake. But jokes didn't move markets. Power did. And the woman covered in cake held more than they ever imagined. The CEO remained still, her presence a quiet gravitational force. Frosting had dried in pale ridges along her cheek. Her dress had stiffened from sugar. Her hands were steady. Her assistant approached, tablet glowing with cascading data. "Mom," she murmured, "confirmation from all 14 subsidiaries. The freeze has triggered immediate risk protocols. Their lenders are pulling. Their investors are fleeing. The market is reacting in real time." On the tablet, red indicators blinked like tiny warning beacons, assets locked, deals collapsing, approvals revoked. Each one was a fracture in the dynasty the heiress had taken for granted. A middle-aged advisor rushed toward the heiress parents. "Sir, ma'am, we have minutes, not hours. If nothing stops this, we'll be insolvent before dawn." The heiress gasped, covering her mouth. "Insolvent? You mean broke?" He looked at her with a contempt he didn't bother to hide anymore. "No," he said sharply. "I mean obliterated." The heiress turned to the CEO, desperation leaking into every syllable. "Please, stop it. I said I was sorry." You didn't think," the CEO replied softly, voice calm, even. "That's the problem." The heiress froze, trembling. Her mother stepped forward, voice trembling between anger and fear. "You don't want to do this. You're emotional. You're humiliated. Think about your reputation. Think about the industry." But the CEO met her gaze with a quiet, unflinching certainty. "I am thinking." Her assistant showed another update. "Mom, news outlets have picked up the story. They're preparing headlines about the canceled merger. Stocks tied to their group are already dipping." Her words were soft. Her expression was soft. But her impact was a hammer. Across the room, murmurs erupted. She froze everything? 5 billion gone? Their whole empire depends on that deal. Did she really do that because of the cake? No. She did it because of disrespect. The CEO turned slightly, enough for the entire ballroom to hear her next words. "This wasn't because of a dessert," she said calmly. This was because of a culture. Her assistant added, the lenders are calling emergency meetings. They're assuming insolvency. And Mom Legal has confirmed. Reversing this after midnight will be nearly impossible. The heiress father clutched his chest, realization hitting him like a physical blow. You're destroying us. The CEO blinked once. No, she said quietly. I'm letting gravity work. A hush fell heavy over the room. The matriarch exhaled shakily, her voice cracking for the first time. You could have walked away. The CEO shook her head, slow and deliberate. I did. But your daughter dragged me back. Behind them, someone gasped as another red alert flashed across the advisor's screen. Another deal collapsing, another alliance withdrawing, another line of credit disappearing. Every number dropping was a consequence. Every notification was a reckoning. Every red light was the echo of a single moment. Cake hitting skin, laughter hitting dignity, privilege hitting the wrong woman. The heiress fell to her knees, mascara streaking in lines that mirrored the dried frosting on the CEO's cheeks. Please, she whispered. Please, don't take everything. The CEO watched her for a long moment, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just with the clarity of someone who understood the cost of underestimation. Finally, she spoke soft, steady. Everything? No, I'm only taking what you never valued. Her assistant nodded. It's done, ma'am. The CEO exhaled quietly, and the dynasty exhaled its last breath with her. The collapse spread instantly. Phones buzzed in frantic waves as headlines detonated across every screen. The merger dead, the empire destabilized, lenders fleeing. Guests who once laughed now stepped away from the heiress family as if they were radioactive. Advisors whispered urgently. Politicians slipped out. Donors removed their pins. The heiress knelt frozen, mascara streaked, watching her world evaporate. Her parents stood hollow, shaken, unable to speak. And for the first time all night, the room understood exactly who held power. Not the heiress, not her dynasty, the woman they covered in cake. She walked toward the exit, frosting dried on her skin like the last remnants of a battle she never asked for. Her assistant joined her, tablet dimming as the final confirmations rolled in. Funds redirected, the assistant murmured. Community centers, scholarships, shelters. All approved. The CEO nodded once. Behind her, the heiress dynasty crumbled in stunned silence. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Power didn't shout tonight. It simply decided, and the woman they tried to humiliate left the ballroom not as a victim but as the verdict.